Happy Thursday. Yesterday I was here in the plenary. I was standing in the back and I hit the light switch and the lights flickered for the whole space and the secretary was interrupted. So I'm going to try not to have any technical snafus today. So we'll jump in because I know lunch is next. So I'm Angie Bailey. I'm director of the Broadband Infrastructure Office at NCDIT. Ben Shelton is obviously with the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes broadly on what we're doing, tackling with broadband across the state, and then turn it over to Ben. So you all may know this. As a result of the COVID pandemic, there's been a huge focus on broadband the past few years and ensuring that all of our homes and businesses across the state have broadband service available to them. And they don't. And I'm sure you all as mappers know, we have the second largest rural population in the country, next to Texas. So it's not just that we have rural areas, but we have people in the rural areas that need service. So that's what we're trying to solve. We were awarded as a state about $1 billion in American Rescue Plan Act funds a few years ago. That was appropriated by our General Assembly. And so we've been working these past few years to get out this $1 billion. Most of it is for broadband infrastructure. We've got 4 separate programs, and I'll just touch on them. We have a program called the Great Grant Program, which is for getting last mile broadband service out to our homes and businesses. That pot has been essentially all allocated, $350 million. We have our Completing Access to Broadband program, which is a procurement. It's a partnership with each county that wants to participate. And we had about $158 million awarded. We've made 4 awards since last Friday because we're in the middle of our new application round. So we've awarded about another $8 million. You probably heard our announcement yesterday. We're working hard to get the rest of that $400 million pot contracted by the end of April. We got a stopgap solutions program that will be rolling out, and a broadband pole replacement program. And then the legislature had appropriated $1 million for mapping, which is our partnership with CGIA. And then we've got our other side of the house is our Office of Digital Opportunity, and they work on ensuring that we have that communities across the state have access to digital skills to be able to utilize the internet that's being built. Because if folks aren't adopting and utilizing it, then there's obviously no point in building it. So this is what we're tackling. After the American Rescue Plan Act funds, there's also another pot of $1.5 billion called the BEAD program. That's Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. That is coming down from U.S. Department of Commerce. And we have done all the planning requirements for the BEAD program and launched a really extensive challenge process, which is a mapping process so people can submit data where they think the availability data needs to be changed, where it may be inaccurate. And Stephanie Jane Edwards, I'm not sure if she's here, but if you see her at the conference, she's our mapper internal at Broadband Infrastructure Office, and she's amazing, and she's been leading on that process. So all to say, we're planning to launch the BEAD application round in June, but we do expect changes at the federal level, so we're kind of tracking that. I actually think we're in good shape because we haven't launched. We should be able to incorporate any changes that come down from the federal government before we launch, which is kind of ideal. So we've got BEAD happening, and then so what we're trying to do obviously is get all of our remaining unserved and underserved locations across the state served. So it's a huge process. We rely on data from the FCC that outlines, again, availability status of every location, household and business across the state. The FCC uses fabric that they have, they're partnered with CostQuest to develop this fabric of locations. But the address and C data that we have in the state is kind of how we cross-check that. And so as you all can imagine, this is a huge undertaking to track data at this level. And I wanted to be here today to really recognize CGIA and all the work that they do with us on this broadband work, because we couldn't do it without them. And also you all as local, if we have local governments here, I'm sure we do, your partnership and that data that we receive as a state is critical to this work as well. And I'll turn it over to Ben. I just want to say the last piece on this data is current as of June 30th, 2024. The FCC then publishes every 6 months, so this was released in November. It doesn't capture the Helene changes, and so we are working and talking through how we can capture that. What's the best way to capture that in our processes moving forward? So I'm going to turn it over to Ben, who's going to kind of talk, obviously, more about how we're managing this giant data set. Thank you, Ben.
All right, thanks, Angie. Like she said, that previous map that we were on, this is kind of the problem statement. These are the homes, businesses that lack adequate internet according to the FCC maps. And this is the problem we're trying to tackle and get service to all of those locations. So, we have all of this once in a lifetime opportunity and all these funding programs to really solve the problem and get, all of these rural homes and businesses connected to this critical resource. And then this is kind of the next step. As we fund things, we kind of take those eligible locations off the map. So what's shown here in red are the same locations in that previous map, but these are the ones that have not received funding currently. The blue and green points on top of here are those locations that we've already allocated either through federal programs like the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund or some local projects that were done around the state. And then we have the green points on this map are all of our state programs, the GREAT Grant program that Angie mentioned, and our completing access to broadband, which we did a round last year where we funded thousands of locations. Well, we have a second round that's ongoing right now. That's the award that was announced by the Secretary yesterday. So with all of that, kind of what's remaining, we're kind of taking bites of the problem and solving them little pieces at a time. But this is the constant process that we go through to define, okay, what's eligible for the next program, and then what's eligible for the next program. And it's a constant iteration of looking at, okay, where's the problem areas that we still need to solve. And like Angie mentioned, all the local county data that we get through either the Next Gen 911 program, where we get the addresses that flow into Address NC. We have our statewide parcels data that comes through our parcel transformer for all 100 counties. We have the building footprints from a few different sources. And of course the orthoimagery program data. All of that state data goes into us making sure that the FCC maps are accurate and not missing anyone. Because if they're not on those FCC maps, we can't put funding towards them. So we want to make sure that nobody's being left out of all of these funding programs. So all that state data goes into a lot of processes that we run. Daniel Turner on our team really headed up the efforts to go through, try to find all of those missing locations and challenge in these bulk challenges to the FCC to get people added to the map, make sure they're not being overlooked. And then in that, we kind of process all of this broadband data. It comes in twice a year. They issue new location data, and then a few months later, the providers do provider reporting to the FCC, and we get that availability data. So it's kind of a constant process of updating the locations and then updating the availability data on top of those locations, seeing how the maps change, and looking at where those unserved and underserved locations are. And this is just a quick glimpse of kind of how that challenge process looks. We do some automated routines that go through and combine those parcels and addresses and building footprints and all that good data. And then we go in and visually validate. So in this map, the pink triangles are what the FCC's maps show as serviceable locations. And then we look at, the parcels, addresses, building footprints. We take the emergency management building footprints, and we also kind of coordinate that with some AI machine learning building footprints that we worked with AWS to develop a process to use our imagery to extract those footprints in a quick manner, cast a wide net, show any parcel that could potentially have a building that we need to go in there and look a little closer at and find those missing locations. So in this example, the white circle on the map is where a location is missing from that broadband serviceable location fabric, and that we need to go and challenge it and put that household on the map. So that's really what we're looking for. And if I go back to the last slide, we've challenged in all 100 counties. We have challenges that thousands of locations that we've had added to the map. through all of this work. So, I mean, it's really kind of made a big impact to make sure that we're funding the correct locations. There's a lot of categories we can do in these challenges. That you can challenge address strings. You can look at just the positional location of the points, and there's 9 different categories we can challenge. But really, primarily, what we wanted to focus on was that challenge category 1, where somebody's missing off that map because we can't fund them. So we've made other challenges, but the critical ones are those category 1s. And then also the state data plays a huge role, and as we get new iterations of the FCC data, we may have to kind of crosswalk, what we call crosswalk, the points from one version of the map to the next version of the map, especially in those funded or protected locations. Some of those earlier grant programs were defined in Address NC. Well, we want to crosswalk those from Address NC into the new data set. We do that using Address NC, parcels, building footprints. The same kind of framework data sets really play a huge role in our ability to go from one version of the fabric to the next to make sure we're doing it in an accurate manner. We're not double funding a location, because that's, by statutes and things, we can't fund a location that has already received funding. So all of that crosswalk process helps us, kind of go between those versions and be accurate, and using those parcels. I mean, parcels really play a huge role alongside that Address NC data set. And like I said, it's just kind of an iterative cycle. It's a big data process. We have, 4.5 million points in the state we have to track everything on. All of that state data is going in to inform those maps. But also, it's just we use Postgres on the back end, a lot of Python scripting. We're starting to incorporate FME to really highlight and document those workflows and streamline them and automate them. So we're using all of these pieces to kind of keep this circle flowing. We go and look at the data coming from the FCC and that broadband data collection. We check out what's unserved, what's underserved, what's the problem that we're trying to solve. We look at the potential funding that was already assigned and allocated. Okay, what's remaining? And then through that, we roll it into the next funding program so that we can roll those projects out to serve those unserved, underserved households. And then when that happens, then it becomes a project tracking. We have to also track all of those locations that we are funding. We have to report to the U.S. Treasury at a location level. This location is getting this service from this provider at this speed and this level. So all of that goes in, and it just kind of continuously iterates through this kind of loop that we have to maintain, especially every 6 months as the new FCC data is coming out. And everything we do, the GIS piece of this is all done through NC1 Map. We have a broadband page where we put all these apps and data pieces that people can look at and see. It plays a huge role in the transparency and accountability of these programs. The GIS part is how people can go in and see where all this funding and all these taxpayer dollars are going out to help these communities connect to these important critical services, really improving their ability to participate in the modern day economy, schooling, healthcare, all the different pieces that some of these rural areas, maybe living in a city, we may take for granted that internet is ubiquitous, but a lot of those rural areas, and as Angie mentioned, we have a huge rural population in North Carolina. A lot of those areas do not have those same benefits, those same services. So we want to make sure we're being accountable to those areas and showing them where they can expect things to come down their way. One of the newer applications we put together to do this is called our status map. So this broadband location status map is built on Experience Builder, and we have a desktop version and a mobile version so if somebody doesn't have internet, they can at least go on their phone and search in their address, look at, okay, what's the FCC data showing as my current status? What's my service level? Am I underserved, unserved? Is somebody saying that they serve this that needs to be challenged on those FCC maps? If there is funding to a location, in this example, the pink haloed points are state-funded locations. So you can click on any of those locations or search in the search box at the top. Understand, okay, what's the project? What's the company that received the funding? What's the status of that project? When is the required build dates for this? So when is kind of all this project supposed to be completed? When can I expect better service at my location? So there's a whole team on in the broadband office that they handle citizen inquiries, and they use this to kind of help those citizens navigate this information and see what's coming down their way and understand okay, where these programs are funding. So it's really important We used to kind of, because that CostQuest data the FCC uses is really a licensed proprietary data set. So a lot of the challenges early on we had was we had to aggregate things up to kind of like a hex bin level or something else, because we weren't allowed to distribute in a downloadable format of the point data set that the FCC is using. Well, recently in the past year, we're able to stand up these kind of secure services. ArcGIS Online has some really nice capabilities where we can publish a secure service to our enterprise, put it behind credentials, and then pull it in as a, using that URL from our enterprise, pull it into ArcGIS Online as a pointer to that service, store those credentials, and only allow it to go into certain applications and web maps. And with doing that, you can kind of restrict it so nobody can go out there and web scrape it, download the data. That's the problem with proprietary licensed data sets. You really have to be strict on your compliance with that license and not allowing that distributed data set. Everything else we like to do on NC One Map, as you know, is probably open data. We like to distribute data, get it out to all the stakeholders, but we need to make sure that we're abiding by what the FCC's guidelines are for those licenses. And we do that using that ArcGIS Online. So when you publish that service with those credentials, there's a limited usage settings in the back end where you can say, okay, only this web map, only this experience builder can use this data, and nobody can go out there and mistakenly find the REST service and scrape it and get all that data. But that status map is a really good tool to see like current status. As Angie mentioned, we're kind of going through, I think it's 86 counties in the current CAB round that could potentially get projects in the next month or so. After all those CAB projects, we have also a new program called the NC Stopgap Solutions Program. And for this, it's kind of, what's remaining after we've taken everything off the map from what received a proposal in round 2 of CAB. Well, what's remaining is shown on this map, and providers can go out there and maybe there's an edge case where they have a current project in an area. Well, there's some eligible locations that they just didn't get that are right on the edge where they could edge out that project and capture those locations as well. So they can go through this Stopgap Solutions Program. It's an $86 million American Rescue Plan Act funded program that they could go out and get those potential edge out cases and get them funded as well. So all of that in the goal of getting as much off the map and served, or at least funded to be served, before we get to that BEAD program that's coming down the pike, and hopefully we'll have further guidance from the feds on that soon, to where we can start rolling out the BEAD program and getting those last pieces. And the goal is 100%. We want, after that BEAD program, we want to be 100% served across the state. And that service level, and I don't think I clarified that in the beginning, but served in the context of all these programs is 100 megabytes per second download and 20 megabytes per second upload. Many of these programs are 100 megabytes symmetrical at a minimum. Like all of the CAB projects that we're currently going through are all 1 gigabyte fiber projects, symmetrical at a minimum. So it's really going to improve things across the state and the connectivity and the availability for people to get online and really participate as needed. So in this map, we've also prioritized locations. So the red locations, these are eligible locations, but these are locations that have also received a survey or a citizen inquiry at that location coming into the office. So this is really, yes, these are eligible locations, but these are people who have actually reached out and testified that this is an unserved location that we need to address. And so we really take it seriously when people contact the office, and we want to help as many people as we can and not just think that their information is coming in and we're not doing anything about it. So overall, I mean, it's just been really kind of a rewarding exercise over the last few years to see such a huge program really making impacts across the state and all these communities, and really the NCGIS group at the center of all of these moving pieces and really at the center of all these programs. So we have the FCC map challenges. We have all that statewide data flowing into those, really informing that process. We have the broadband funding programs, administrating those programs. And then we have also the project tracking after those programs have been awarded. So all 3 of those huge processes, really at the center of that is the GIS work and the data. A lot of that data that many of you may contribute really is kind of informing all of these processes and making it be, accountable, transparent, and really enabling us to report out all of this stuff in a very good way. So it's been very rewarding. We've I think we've funded about 180,000 locations so far. We've, 127 great grant projects, 92 counties, 56 CAB round one projects. It's a typo, it should be 4 CAB projects in round 2 right now, but many more to come very soon. We're working on that as we speak. So all of this is just continuing to improve things around the state, and GIS has played such a big role in it. So if you've contributed to these statewide data sets, we just wanted to say thank you. Continue to do the great work that you all do, and it's just not just broadband, but this is just one highlight of how that data really makes an impact on many things around the state. So with that, I think we are at time. If there's any questions for Angie or myself. Yes, ma'am. So the question is, any recommendations for how to prioritize locations for potential funding? I don't know, do you want to speak on prioritization?
Sure. So for the Complete and Access to Broadband program, there was an opportunity for counties to send us data to prioritize locations, and some counties did, some didn't. For our stopgap program, we're using either service inquiries that have been submitted to us through our website or our NC Broadband survey. And then moving forward for the BEAD program, there's not really a prioritization because the mandate is we have to get to 100% of all unserved households and businesses. But if you're with a county and you feel like you have locations that should be represented, I'd be happy to talk to you after. The American Rescue Plan Act funds, we don't expect delays. So the SLFRF funding was already kind of in the hands of the state through our North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. We also have a pot called Capital Project Funds. We don't expect delays in that. That's a different kind of ARPA. The BEAD program, I think this is just my guess. I think that the program will continue. But of course, the leadership at the U.S. Department of Commerce has changed, and they are saying there will be changes. So we think the changes will be things like requirements that get dropped. There's some things around, climate and labor standards. And I mean, again, this is all speculation. I think the most substantial thing that we're tracking is whether, for the definition of reliable broadband service, whether that would be changed to include satellite. And so that would be a pretty significant change to the program because, of course, satellite's not the same as fiber. And really, people already have access, so how do you incent for that? Because these are incentive programs. So that's kind of what we don't, I think the BEAD program, the funding will continue, but I think we're just, again, tracking changes. Well, I'm not an attorney. We could have Heather answer. No, I'm teasing. Heather's one of our DIT attorneys. I think there could be a lot of legal debates about that. We do have state legislation. It's fairly broad. The BEAD program at the federal level has been fairly rigid. So it actually would be, if some of that is loosened, that might be beneficial to the state. But, it would just depend. I don't think I can answer. But it's a good question.
I think that's the normal answer. I've asked that for a few states.
Yeah. So wait and see.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I hope everybody has a super lunch and a super rest of the conference.